I'm Sheila Siegel, and it's my pleasure to co-host this evening of social justice learning with Rachel Beck on behalf of BZBI's racial justice team. A few months ago, when anti-racism protests erupted in our city, our country, and around the world, many BZBI congregants were asking, what can we do? And one thing we did was to gather a small group of BZBI members who, with the blessings of our clergy, began to explore the work of power. That's Philadelphians organized to witness, empower, and rebuild. And as many of you surely already know, POWER is a highly respected interfaith organization that brings together more than 70 congregations in the Philadelphia area, southeastern Pennsylvania and central Pennsylvania, all in the pursuit of racial and economic justice for all. We're so happy to bring you this evening's program as an opportunity for all of us to learn more about this amazing organization. And for this, we are so pleased and so grateful to welcome three individuals who have been deeply involved in POWER's work. Bishop Dwayne Royster, welcome. Rabbi Mordechai Liebling, welcome. And we'll welcome David Mosenkis, who will join us a bit later. And by the way, David's parents, Nada and Bob, are members of BZBI. But before we dive into our educational program, we turn to our own Rabbi Annie Lewis, who has worked closely with our racial justice team for some reflection on the spiritual values that ground us and guide us as we come together this evening. Rabbi Annie.
Thank you, Sheila and Rachel, and so delighted to share this wonderful Zoom sanctuary with Bishop Royster, Rabbi Mordechai Liebling, and David Mosenkis. Grateful to all of you who made the time to be here tonight, all of you who have been reaching out and asking, how can we be a voice for life and for justice and for dignity in our city and beyond. So I want to open with some words from the prophet Isaiah, who is our dear friend this time of year as we are moving out of the season of lament. In this period of comfort, we turn to the words of Isaiah. And I want to share a passage from Isaiah that we will read on Yom Kippur as well. So Isaiah calls to us, "Is such the fast I desire, a day for men to starve their bodies? Is it bowing the head like a bulrush and lying in sackcloth and ashes? Do you call that a fast, a day when Adonai is favorable? No," says Isaiah on behalf of God, "this is the fast I desire, to unlock the fetters of wickedness and untie the cords of the yoke, to let the oppressed go free, to break off every chain. It's to share your bread with the hungry and to take the poor into your home, to care for those who are vulnerable. When you see the naked, clothe them, and not to ignore those who cry out." And I have a distinct memory of studying this text with Bishop Royster a number of years ago, and clergy from across the city sitting around a table in the Power office at St. Malachi Parish in North Philadelphia. It was winter at the time, and I remember sharing sandwiches and clementines and reading these verses of the prophet Isaiah. And the rabbis in the room shared with our Christian colleagues how we read these words every Yom Kippur, that Isaiah reminds us that as we do the inner work of fasting, of stretching our bodies and souls, that we must also remember to let the ritual ripple out into the repair of the world around us. I was thinking of Isaiah's words a few weeks ago during the fast of Tisha B'Av, as he called us back to the true purpose of a fast. On Tisha B'Av, we recalled the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem and other moments of catastrophe and powerlessness in our Jewish past. On Tisha B'Av, we took a close look at the brokenness and chaos in the world. We voiced our lament. And as we descended into despair, we also began to search for an opening, to begin to piece together all that has been shattered. The sages of our Talmud link the observance of Tisha B'Av with the Torah's story of the downfall of the scouts who are sent to scope out the land of Canaan, the promised land. Immobilized by fear, they return with tales of the giants that inhabit the land, sparking terror in their fellow Israelites. And the scouts see themselves as tiny grasshoppers in the face of the strangers that live on the other side of the Jordan River. And as a consequence of their feeling inconsequential, God decrees that the generation of Israelites who left Egypt will never enter the land that has been promised to their people. The ancient rabbis teach that this tragic punishment was wrought on the 9th of Av, a day that would be known as one of weeping for future generations. And so I think that Tisha B'Av that we just observed took us to a place of this tension between our powerlessness and our power. We have to remember every year what happens when we are stripped of power. And at the same time, in this story of the scouts, we're warned of the danger of forgetting the power that we may have, that we do have to thrive in the face of great adversity. Nearly 2,000 years after the destruction of the Second Temple, it's hard not to feel overwhelmed or paralyzed by the giants that loom around us, by the pandemic, by racism, anti-Semitism, bigotry, poverty, violence, environmental degradation. The suffering is immense. And there have been many times where I have felt overwhelmed and have felt powerless. And yet, in this season of Tisha B'Av, after we mourn our losses, we're called to connect to our agency to improve the conditions of our society. We're called to search for flecks of hope that our world can better resemble our vision and values, can be a place of compassion, a place of dignity, a place of life for those who are most vulnerable. And one crucial step in connecting with our power is to find kindred spirits in our work. This way we remember that we're not alone in our sadness at the state of things or our longing to build a world that looks different. And this is why I was drawn to community organizing work in rabbinical school, spent some time working with communities of faith in Marin County, California, in North Jersey, and when I served as assistant rabbi at Germantown Jewish Center, had the blessing of becoming deeply involved in power as the community of Germantown Jewish Center went through a long process and decided to affiliate with Power. And it's been amazing to see Power grow. It now represents 70 congregations across the city and the region, and you'll hear so much more about all of Power's work tonight. But a few things that stand out in my time working with Power at Germantown Jewish Center was so moved by seeing Philadelphians engaging in public life and civic action, striving to build a city of opportunity for all. We marched at City Hall and in Harrisburg, and we read that text of Isaiah on the steps of the Capitol, and we blew shofar on a day of fasting for a full and fair funding formula for our schools, for public education across the state of Pennsylvania. Have memories of standing in solidarity with low-wage workers at the airport, of community members standing beside one another, of filling Mother Bethel AME Church after the terrible racist massacre in Charleston. Power congregations packed the church together to mourn, to be together, to cry out together. And it was amazing to watch people forge relationships with others of different races and faiths and from different neighborhoods and income levels that came from an ongoing commitment that people would stand by one another in times of struggle and also in times of celebration. And so I'm really excited and grateful for the work of our leaders here at BZBI, Sheila and Rachel, and also Ariella Marin, Les Robbins, Jesse Bacon, and Arlene Fickler have come together to start the process of exploring power. And now all of you are here along for this journey to see how we can, as a BZBI community, connect with our dreams for our lives, for our city, for our neighbors, and work along with our neighbors to bring about justice, to bring about life, to bring about hope. And so I just want to end with words that we recited at the end of Echav, the Book of Lamentations, and that will be with us for this entire season into the high holidays. We cry out, Hashivenu Adonai elecha v'nashuva chadesh yameinu kekedem. Return us, Adonai, to you, and we will return. Renew our days as of old. And so I pray that God will be with us, helping us to remember our power to restore and rebuild, that God will grant us the resilience to create a city and a country of dignity, of opportunity, of deep connection, of justice for all.
Amen. Thank you, Rabbi Annie, for beginning our time together with words, with teachings that so meaningfully frame our mission, our shared mission. And thank you for always inspiring us with your commitment to social justice. And now I have the huge honor of introducing Bishop Dwayne Royster, who has been involved with power since the early days, the very earliest days. Currently, Bishop Royster is the interim executive director of Power, and he's the former executive director of Power Interfaith as well. He has also served in pastoral ministry for more than 26 years in a variety of positions and denominations, and he is currently the National Political Director of Faith in Action, the nation's largest faith-based organizing movement, which is committed to racial and economic justice and has more than 40 federations in 26 states and 4 countries. And we'll learn more about that a little bit further on in the evening. Bishop Royster, we are so excited and grateful to have you with us, and we're eager to learn from your vast and rich experience.
Thank you, Sheila, for the invitation to come and share. I hope you all are hearing me clearly. I put in my headset in these days of COVID. My daughter and my wife are upstairs, and sometimes the noise gets loud, so I put the headset on. It's a little easier so you all can hear me. Thank you, Rachel, for the invitation to come. Thank you, Rabbi Annie Lewis, for your message today. That sermon will preach anywhere. That was a powerful, powerful message, and I so appreciate the days that we spent when you were at GJC and just getting to know you and exploring organizing with you in those early days of Power. And now it's great to be able to reconnect again. I look so forward to that. Well, and to my colleague, Rabbi Mordecai Liebling, who needs no introduction. I don't know that there are too many people in the Jewish community don't know Rabbi Liebling. So we do that. And then our friend and colleague, David Mazenkis, who has really led powerfully on our education work across Power. And actually, I can't just say it's about Power. He's actually led around the state on this issue, really helping folk around the state understand the implications of race and funding in terms of our educational system. So I'm glad to be able to be here. I'm so glad to hear that BZBI is interested in Power and becoming a part of the community together and learning more. I apologize. I'm actually, unfortunately, a little bit double booked tonight, so I'll be with you for a little while, but then I have to drop off to go to another call. But please know I'm always available to you. Rabbi Mordecai will stay on for the duration of the call. So why don't we go to our first slide and let's kind of talk about Power a little bit. So Power, and I want to talk about our history. I want to talk about mission, but I need to go back and I'm going to focus on some on the slides, but I want to tell a story. So years ago in Philadelphia, there were two organizing movements that existed prior to Power. EPOP, which is Eastern Pennsylvania Organizing Project, and the other one was called Philadelphia Interfaith Action, which was a part of the IAF. In the early 2000s, both of those organizations died and did not exist anymore. And for several years, there was no faith-based organizing in the city of Philadelphia. Um, as a result of that, PICO National Network, which we now call Faith in Action, changed its name a couple of years ago, is now Faith in Action, sent an organizer into Philadelphia in partnership with a couple of congregations in the city to explore what it would mean to start a new faith-based organizing movement here in the city. That organizer was named Wes Lathrop. And Wes came into Philadelphia and began organizing clergy. Over about 2 or 3 year period, he did hundreds of one-to-ones with clergy leaders all across the city of Philadelphia, having conversations with them. I was actually one of those leaders that he talked with in 2010. And he came to talk to me, and I was like, yeah, I don't know about this. We'll see what happens. And I said, come back to me, later on. And he came back to me some months later. And actually, I wound up getting on the original organizing team with Wes and David Kopish that actually helped put together the final combination that would become Power. And so Power had its founding convention September 25th, 2011. You're going to see a video about that in a little bit. But I wanted to give that background to say that early on, Pastor Zach Ravowski and Sweet Union Baptist Church were the original congregation that was partnering with Wes to help build out a new organizing movement here in the city of Philadelphia. And in those early days, this mission came into being. Power uses our belief in God's goodness and compassion for the suffering to organize and empower the people of Philadelphia. And then later on, we added Northeastern Pennsylvania, Southeastern Pennsylvania, and Central Pennsylvania to live and work together so that God's presence is known on every block and that people work together to transform the conditions of their neighborhood and that life flourishes for all. And in many ways, if I could go back and redo this again, I would say that our role is to partner, to ally with those that are closest to the pain and help them find their way, to find their voice, to find their power, and to use everything that God has given them to be able to exercise their agency and authority in the world, to be able to create the change that they need to see, that they have a say in their collective destiny in their community in Philadelphia, in Pennsylvania, in the United States, and beyond. Can we go to the next slide? So the groundwork was laid. You're seeing a little bit of this. In 2009, 2010, we had 200 conversations with faith leaders in Philly, support from PICO National Network, identifying interest in building a new organization. 2011, 250 lay people did a training on how to do one-to-ones, and then they conducted 1,250 conversations with other members of their congregation. As a result of that, we did 50 research meetings with decision makers. And I always want to define research meetings because a lot of people think that when we're talking about research meetings, we're talking about, reading, going to the library, reading books. But actually, when we do research meetings, it's about the people that are closest to the pain and their partners actually sitting down with key decision makers and authority figures and trying to figure out what are the ways that we can solve problems that we are seeing. So some folk were having conversations about healthcare. And so they were meeting with the health commissioner. They were meeting with the presidents of hospitals. Some folk were working on economic issues. So we were meeting with the president of Citizens Bank. Some folk were concerned about jobs. So we actually went down and had conversations in Washington, D.C. With the Secretary of Labor for the federal government, and also spent some time having conversations with the FAA because we knew billions of dollars were going to be invested at the Philadelphia airport. So we meet with them, do some research to try to figure out what was possible. 5 themes emerged from those 1,250 conversations: jobs, school funding, criminal justice, healthcare, and housing. And then on September 25th, we had our very first gathering of kind of coming above ground, where 2,500 people gathered. 37 congregations committed themselves to become power members at the founding convention that was held at Tinley Temple United Methodist Church right there on Broad Street. We could have the next slide. So Power became the largest multiracial, multi-faith grassroots organizing network in Pennsylvania. There actually is another organization on the western side of the state, but we are actually the largest. And although we originally started out just in Philadelphia, now we have spread our wings. We're in the collar counties around Philadelphia, the four collar counties, Bucks, Delaware, Montgomery, and Chester County. We're now up in the Lehigh Valley and Lehigh and Northampton counties. We're now over in central Pennsylvania, in Lancaster, York, Lebanon, and Dauphin counties, where we are helping to organize congregations to get engaged in the work. And I think one of the things that's important for us to understand about this work is that it's not just the clergy that are engaged in the work, it's actually the people that are actually doing the work, the people that are actually the people in the pews or the chairs in the congregation that are actually having meetings with mayors and governors and senators and congress people who are asking them the hard questions about what they see for our community and making the demands of them at the same time about what is necessary for our community to be able to thrive. They are this very same folk in the pews along with the clergy that are holding the actions, that are in the streets when it sometimes goes to that. It doesn't always go there, but it's those folk that are doing the work day in and day out. I'll take our next slide. So currently, Power has about 70 current dues congregations, although there are about 100 congregations that are in some state of affiliation with Power right now across the area. We're organizing in a multiplicity of counties, Bucks, Chester, Dauphin, Delaware, Lebanon, Erie, Lehigh Valley, Montgomery, Philadelphia. Lancaster is not on there. We need to put that on there. We actually have multiple campaigns that are happening right now. Our climate justice campaign, which is working on RGGI regulations and also was fighting around the refinery down in South Philadelphia. Economic Dignity, that's working on a preemption bill at the federal level so that cities like Philadelphia can make their own wage laws. Live Free campaign, which is working on criminal justice reform, which is both about policing reform, it is about gun violence, it is about juvenile justice, and then our End Education Apartheid, which is our campaign that we've had going on for several years now, with a big victory some years ago when we actually won the funding formula, and now we're working to make sure that the state actually fully funds it. And then I want to say Power is a federation in the Faith in Action, the formerly PICO National Network. And let me just talk about Faith in Action for a minute. So Faith in Action is the largest faith-based organizing movement in the country. Actually, it said 40. There are about 50 some odd organizations in Faith in Action now that are in about 26 states. We're actually growing. I've actually helped when I left Power to go work for our national body, work for Faith in Action. I brought on about 7 new federations in the last 3 years that are doing organizing work in places like Western New York and Nevada. And we're working on a new development in Maine. And the Faith in Action actually started organizing. Father John Bauman was a Jesuit priest who actually started the organization in Oakland, California back in the 1970s. We've been around close to 50 years doing organizing work. Started very much on the West Coast and then has moved to the East Coast. And now the Northeast region, which I also happen to serve as I'm no longer the National Political Director, I actually serve as the Northeast Regional Director. We actually now have 17 organizations between Maine and Virginia that I work with in helping to support on a regular basis. So Faith in Action is up and down the East Coast. We are in the central part of the country, we're in the western part of the country, and we're sure enough down in the south, working on similar campaigns, although every federation, and a federation is what Power is, so just so you understand what a federation is. Power is a federation of Faith in Action. So when we say federations, they're more power-like organizations all around the country that are doing similar work to be able to create change that's both local, that's both at the state level and both at the federal level. We're using all of our collective power to be able to fully impact structural and systemic racism and policy change that can actually make all of our lives better in a very powerful way. I believe our next slide is taking us up to a video. Let me just make sure I'm right on that. And so, yeah, this is actually a picture of our founding convention, and we apologize, it's 10 years ago. Technology isn't quite what it is today. And so the video is amazing as we watch Tinley Temple packed to the gills of people that were there. We had Mayor Mike Nutter, who was the mayor at the time at the event. What a lot of people don't know about this event is that a couple hours before we were getting ready to have the action, Mayor Nutter's people called and said they weren't going to come. And they thought that we were only going to have 100 people. At the time, Malcolm Byrd, who was the head of the mayor's faith-based office, was negotiating with us. And basically he was like, so what do you expect, 300 people? And I said, we're going to have 2,000 people at this event. And he did not believe that we were going to have that number of people at the event. We're going back and forth. The mayor didn't want to be asking any questions. He just wanted to speak. And so we finally negotiated in a way that we were going to ask him the questions. He was going to give him time to speak. But what you don't see on this video is when the mayor walked into Tinley Temple. And so he saw that the first level was full. But then he walked up on the rostrum, and then he looked into the balcony at Tinley, and he saw that it was basically standing room only at Tinley Temple United Church of Christ. I mean, United Methodist Church. And his face, he kind of did this double take that was absolutely amazing to watch, because we had delivered what they thought we could not deliver. Later on, after we had this original meeting, we heard from some people on mayor's staff who said the mayor was very concerned because we had brought all of Philadelphia together, that there are multiple faith traditions, multiple race communities were there, different pockets all across Philadelphia were present in that room. And he knew in that moment that we would be a force that he'd have to contend with. And that when you united the people in that way, we would actually be able to create change. And it actually fundamentally shifted the relationship we had with the mayor at that point. It went from, oh, great, love you guys, what are you going to do, to a lot more tension with him because he knew that we were speaking to all different parts and segments of the city that actually wanted to have a say in the destiny of Philadelphia. So I want to show this video, and if I don't know what Sheila and Rachel, what the plan is, but if you need to have some questions, I can hang on for a little bit after this before I have to jump off the call. But why don't we go ahead and watch this great video.
Because the wall was broken down, employment was hard to find. Because businesses don't invest in cities with broken down walls. Because the wall was broken down, drugs were sold in broad daylight. Because the walls were broken down, people just threw their trash in the street. Because the wall was broken down, nobody felt safe at night. Because the wall was broken down, seniors couldn't sell their student children couldn't walk to school without the fear of being shot. The wall was broken down and people were living with the air of hopelessness all around them. But as hopeless as it looked and as dire as the situation was, God called together a group called Power.
Oh, sorry, I just saw the messages. Can you guys hear the video?
Yes,
Yes.
can hear it, just can't see it.
You can't see it.
Sorry about that. Okay, let me try this again.
It's really worth seeing.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna restart the screen share and see if that helps. Okay, can you see it paused now?
Can see it.
Yeah, we see a pause.
Okay, sorry about that. Let's try again. Good?
There we go.
Good.
It won't talk to you though.
Because the wall was broken down, employment was cities with broken down walls. Because the walls were broken down, drugs were sold in broad daylight. Because the walls were broken down, people just threw their trash in the street. Because the wall was broken down, nobody felt safe at night. Because the wall was broken down, seniors couldn't sell their students and children couldn't walk to school without the fear of being shot. The wall was broken down and people were living with the air of hopelessness all around them. But as hopeless as it looked and as dire as the situation was, God called together a group called Power.
United Methodist Church. We affirm the Power platform and we are founding members, 110 strong today, of the Prince of Peace Lutheran Church. Right there.
The Congregation St. Williams, located along Crest Section, Philadelphia.
Congregation Mishkan Shalom.
Master of the Law, 7700 Oakland Avenue. 175 proud American Muslim families, and we affirm the Power platform.
The Old First Reformed United Church of Christ.
The Second Baptist Church of Germantown.
St. Rita Catholic.
Outreach St. Augustine at 41st and Parish Street. This is Church of St. Martin in the Fields.
Brooklyn Community Baptist Church. We affirm the Power platform.
We affirm the Power platform. We are founding member of Power. God bless you all.
What we're demonstrating tonight is community organizing at its best. I look forward to a powerful relationship. I look forward to the opportunity to have thousands of you and your voices and your presence in your churches and your neighborhoods, knocking down the barriers that have held many of our Philadelphians back for a long, long period of time. The time could not be better to demonstrate our power.
Okay.
It's 2018.
Oh.
And Power is living intentionally
into
what we were calling a people's.
Okay. Great. Thank you so much, Bishop Royster, for all that you shared and for this wonderful video. And we are going to have some breakout rooms now for everyone to just get a chance to talk about kind of what moved you, what spoke with you. Bishop Royster, that's gonna be about 10 minutes. Will you still be with us when we get back, or do you have to leave now?
Yeah, I actually need to run to another meeting, and I do apologize.
Okay, no worries. Thank you so much for coming. I know we all really appreciated getting to hear from you directly, and thanks for being with us tonight.
Well, you're in great hands with Rabbi Mordecai, so thank you. Rabbi Lewis, good to see you again. Sheila, thank you so much. And I'm excited about BCBI being a part of Power.
And we'll see you soon, I hope.
All right,
With
wonderful.
God's help, yes.
All right, man. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Bishop.
Thank you.
Nice to see you and your family.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, so we're gonna get a chance to be in breakout rooms. They should all be about 4, maybe 5 people. And in your group, you'll all get a chance to just introduce yourselves. Maybe you'll know everyone, maybe you won't. And just share just like a minute of why you came tonight, what compelled you to want to get involved with BZBI's work with power. And then you'll get to share, so like what brought you tonight before you came, and then based on what you've heard so far, and from this video, what speaks to you about the mission and work of power. And there is one person assigned to facilitate almost every group but group 10. And really they're just there just to make sure that everybody gets a chance to speak, because you'll be in there for 10 minutes and we really just want to make sure that everybody does get a turn. If you're in breakout room 10, you're on your own, but I do have faith in all of you. So yeah, so I can put the questions in the chat, and you should be able to still access them when you get into the breakout room. I know sometimes people think it disappears. It doesn't, but you might just need to scroll down. So introduce yourself, why did you come tonight, and what speaks to you about the mission and work of power. And we'll close the rooms in I'll close the rooms in 9 minutes and give you 60 seconds to come back. So we'll see you all in 10 minutes. Marcy, I am adding you to a room right now.
Hello, Josh.
Hi, unfortunately I have to multitask and I don't have time to join a breakout room right now, but I'm enjoying the amount of this that I am able to participate in.
Okay, I happen to be in a break. This is Rabbi Mordechai, and if while you're multitasking, you want to ask me any questions about power, please feel free.
No questions, just really glad BZBI is on board.
Okay, great.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. I'm going to now, we're going to be hearing from Rabbi Mordechai Liebling, who I know many of you know, and we've already people have already mentioned him, but just to give you a little background on who he is, Rabbi Mordechai Liebling is the Director of Reflection and Renewal Process at Power. And he came to Power from the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College, where he founded and directed the Social Justice Organizing Program. And so he's going to be talking us through some more of what Power is and how Power organizes. And I'm going to put back up our presentation so he can talk us through it.
Hi, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. Rachel, could I have a time check, please, about how much time I have, let's say, before I introduce David? I can't hear you if you answered me.
Sorry. I think we're just going to have David come for the second part after slide 15.
Yes. So that's what I want to know. How long do I have until slide 15?
Well,
that's what I want to know.
However long it takes.
Okay.
We haven't, I'd say about, can it be in under 10 minutes?
Yeah, okay, I'll try to do that.
Approximately? Great.
Okay. Thank you. Hi, everybody. It's a pleasure to be with you. Just as Rabbi Annie started with mentioning Isaiah, it reminded me that in these 7 weeks, between Tisha B'Av and Rosh Hashanah when we read Isaiah pretty much every week. One of the things that Isaiah that we read is that he talks about the rebuilt temple as a place of worship, not only for Jews, but for all people of God. And they picture Jerusalem as a city cared for by all nations. So it's one of our earliest sort of interfaith visions of a time where people could work together to bring about a better world, which is exactly what power does. So power, the work of community organizing, the work of power is really rooted in relationships. Everything begins with conversations, begins with what we call one-on-ones, one person talking to another person, panim el panim, face to face, the way Moses wanted to talk to God, the way the cherubim on top of the ark looked at each other. It's about face-to-face relationships. And everything begins there. And that's having those conversations first, certainly within your congregation. And those conversations are about uncovering people's passions, people's interests, what in community organizing is called self-interest, the idea that people act most strongly, most immediately out of their self-interest. But it's not, it's self-interest writ large. And in the next slide, I'll talk more about, a little bit about self-interest. And it's about research. Bishop Royster mentioned research. So the research is talking to people who are most affected by an issue, and it's also talking to the people who have power to change the issue, and it's also talking to experts who know a lot about the issue, and it's doing it with groups of people that you can ask questions and have a free-flowing conversation. Doing the research allows us to create a strategy. Doing the research allows us to set goals that we, the policy goals that we want to create, the things that we want to change are based in research. We try not to do anything without really getting a full picture. And a piece of that full picture is stories. We are great believers in narrative, in that every person has a story to tell, and that story is rooted in their lives, in their emotions, in their experience, and people's actual experience is where we begin. That's what relational culture is about. It's about seeing another human being in their fullness, hearing their story, and from hearing each other's stories, learning what our interests are, learning what it is that we want to do. And it's only then, when we have the relationships, the research, the stories, that we formulate a strategy of what we want to do. And then that strategy is very much influenced by our faith traditions. And in Power, we have multiple Christian traditions, we have different Jewish denominations, and we have Muslims. So it can be a pretty lively conversation when we bring our faith traditions and sacred texts to bear on issues and how we are going to move. And in a typical Power meeting, we begin with a prayer and we end with a prayer. We very much want to be grounded in a moral life. And in a life guided by our individual and collective understandings of God and collective understandings of what is sacred to all of us. And we move from that point. And we seek to change policy. We want to make real change in people's lives. In a little bit, we'll hear about our education campaign. But when we had a campaign at the airport, we wanted to ensure a living wage of $15 an hour for airport workers. We were shocked to learn how little airport workers earn. It was minimum wage, which is not a living wage, and Power worked hard to help them negotiate the contract. And then Power was one of the organizations most responsible for having a citywide referendum on the ballot a few years ago about living wage, that for people who contract with the city need to pay a living wage in those contracts. So we have real concrete policy goals that change people's lives. And a piece of that is the idea, we believe that people closest to the pain, and in that case it was airport workers, really ought to be sitting at the table helping create the strategy and helping create the demands, and be in there when we are talking to leaders and politicians who have the power, that we honor the fact that people who are actually on the ground doing the work frequently have the best solutions and understand it better than the experts or some person coming in from the outside. So we are very much wanting to empower and work with people who are experiencing the pain, experiencing the oppression, who are on the front line, and to honor their experience and their wisdom. Next slide, please. So relational organizing. We live in a culture that is more a transactional culture. You give me this and I will give you that. We live in a culture that's based on an economic model of paying for something and getting something in return. Most corporate culture is about transactional things. You give me this, I'll give you that. But in community organizing, we call it relational organizing. It is about establishing a relationship with a person. So Bishop Royster mentioned one-on-ones, and I did as well. And that's really taking the time to have a half-hour to hour-long conversation with somebody, as I said, beginning in your congregation, to learn about each other. These aren't conversations to really create personal friendships as so much as to create relationships of people who are willing to work together in the public sphere. I mean, the congregation is a public organization. It's a public relationship. And this is about working together. As I said, it's also learning about each other's self-interest. So we can understand self-interest very narrowly as my personal interest in getting something for myself, which could be a living wage, it could be a good place to live, it could be schooling for my children. Those are very, very important aspects of self-interest, and that doesn't completely define the field of self-interest. We have social self-interests about friendship, about belonging, about being with other people, about needing other people. We have professional self-interests about developing more skills, developing contacts with other people, having visibility. We have moral self-interest about wanting to do the right thing. We have self-interest applies to what makes people feel good about themselves, as well as what materially benefits them. Our own personal self-realization as a person is our self-interest. Our spiritual growth and development is a self-interest. So we understand self-interest widely, both from the level of anywhere from the level of self-preservation to self-realization, and in that spectrum in between. And that is about, so one, relationship building is about learning what each other's self-interests are. And it is also rooted in our faith traditions. Part of our self-interest is our relationship to our faith traditions and the moral and ethical teachings of our traditions that we seek to live out. And the sum on some level of those one-on-one conversations is creating community. The synagogue itself benefits from the creation of those relationships. It's not only power as an organization that benefits, but it's very much in the, quote, self-interest of the synagogue itself as people develop deeper relationships with each other. And frequently it leads to people who hadn't before assumed positions of leadership in the congregation deciding to assume positions of leadership. That what this does, it calls people into the public realm, and in that sense, it calls out the best in people. So relational organizing is for the benefit of the congregation as a whole, as well as the organization. And the overall goal is not about power over anybody, and it's not about power over politicians, and it's not about power over each other, but it's about power with, that we collectively exercise power to bring forth a better world, to realize the goals that we have set together. Next slide, please. Racial equity. So Rachel just told me I don't have that much time, so let me do this quickly. Power looks at all of its campaigns through a lens of race and racism, trying to understand how racism helps us explain whether it's our struggles for economic dignity or our struggles around mass incarceration, climate justice, that we understand that racism is very much at the heart of the system in this country that creates inequities, and we need to struggle against racism in all of our campaigns, have to have an element of anti-racist work. Next slide, please. Okay. I'm gonna just do this one and then introduce David. What does it mean to be a power member congregation? So every congregation in power pays dues. That is a piece of the commitment. And power has a staff of over 20 people at this point. It is funded in part by congregational dues and in large part by foundation grants and other forms of fundraising. But foundation grants and other forms of fundraising are only possible because those donors see that power congregations are committed to the organization. So that level of commitment is crucial in demonstrating to other funders people's levels of seriousness. Next slide, please. Okay. What does it mean to be a power member congregation? The core of the effort is a local organizing committee, which is, I think, what Sheila and Rachel have already, and others have already begun, which is the group of people in the congregation that decides to, that is really in the forefront of the relationship to power, that is in the forefront of creating one-on-one conversations in the congregation as a whole, and helping connect other people into what the different power campaigns are. So they are the organizing center of the congregation, and we do trainings for LOCs all the time. There's ongoing different trainings, such as trainings in how to do one-on-one conversations. And it is important for the clergy to be committed to power, to really get that. We don't see power as a program of the congregation. It is something that is part of the warp and woof of the congregation, not something separate. And finally, all of the congregations come together several times a year in what we call a legislative assembly. You saw a picture of one. That was a founding one, so that was like an unusually large one. But we get together generally quarterly to talk, to make decisions about power moving forward. And every congregation that is a member has a vote at those legislative assemblies. Next slide, please. Okay, we basically covered that. Next slide, please. We can go to the next slide as well. Okay.
I think if we could have David speak now.
Yes, that would be great. So would you like me to introduce David?
It's up to you. Yeah, if you'd like to.
I can, sure. So David Mazinkus is a member of Germantown Jewish Center, and he is a member both of the Powers City Education Campaign and Statewide Education Campaign. And he has done groundbreaking research that has really changed the face of education in Pennsylvania. And he has really proven with computer models that he has created the racist basis of funding in Pennsylvania, so much so that the Pennsylvania legislature was convinced by what he did. And he has been working tirelessly for years doing this work, and it's my pleasure and honor to introduce David Mazinkus. David, you're muted, I believe.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Mordecai, and thanks, Rachel, for inviting me. It's a delight to be here with my kind of second synagogue home in Philadelphia, BZBI, since my parents, who I see here, are members, and I've enjoyed lots of great programs that I've come to visit with at BZBI. And I'm delighted that you're considering becoming part of the Power family. So I thought I would share with you what it's been like for Germantown Jewish Center to consider and then become a part of Power. And we've been a member now for, I can't remember, maybe 6 years or so. We started by learning what Power was about, learning a lot of the principles that Mordecai's just been going through about how it's interfaith and interracial and bringing people together across different lines and working together to build community and build the city that we all want for all of us to have here. And that was of interest to a lot of us at Germantown Jewish Center. And there was a core group of us who decided to take on a more serious exploration of what would this mean for us to join and become a member? What would the commitment be on our part? And what would it do for us as a synagogue community? And we got some coaching by a Power organizer at the time. We learned about a kind of key tool that Power uses for relation-based power building called the one-on-one conversation. And we organized a campaign of one-on-one conversations. This core group of about 8 or 10 of us went out and had held 50 one-on-one conversations with a diverse subset of members of Germantown Jewish Center, and just ask them really open-ended questions about what are the things you care about, what's really important to you, what keeps you up at night, without any preconceived idea about what the answers were going to be, about even choices about choose what's more important. We really just said, what's important to you? And that was great, and it built relationships, and we all got to meet new people, and we kind of formed a cohesiveness also as this team of us that was doing this work together. And we got a really loud and clear message that there were lots of issues that were important to our members. You know, things like, environmental issues were important, and gun violence was important, and economic disparity was important. But far and away, the biggest item that we heard from more members than any other was public education, that people were deeply concerned about the state of public education in Philadelphia. They were concerned about both the lack of opportunities that they saw for a lot of children to get a good education, but also how that directly impacted us as a synagogue situated in the city of Philadelphia, that we had 2 neighborhood schools that are walking distance to our synagogue that very few of our members sent our children to. And that for our longtime viability as a congregation, there were a lot of people who didn't want to be a synagogue community where people felt like they had to send their kids to private schools. So I think there were a number of factors, but public education stood out. And as a result of that, a couple of us started attending the meetings of Power's education strategy team around education justice. And I was one of those people, didn't have any background in this area at all going into this, and just started to learn about what was going on and why was it that some schools had way more resources than others, some school districts more than others, what were some of the issues that were keeping kids from being able to get good educations. And to make a long story short, as Mordechai hinted at, my professional work happens to be as a data scientist doing data work, and I ended up doing some work that kind of laid bare in a really obvious way how the way that the state of Pennsylvania funds its school districts across the state is rife with a really stark racial bias in which districts get more versus less of their fair share of state education dollars. And so the Power Education Justice team has been working really hard at this for the last 4 years or so. We were successful at being among the groups to push for a fair funding formula, which didn't exist before and now does exist. But unfortunately, it's only implemented in a very minimal way. And so we're working now to get that formula implemented in a much broader way. That'll make a big difference for the students in Philadelphia and students of a lot of really hard-strapped districts across the state. And then I'll just say, in terms of the impact at Germantown Jewish Center, one of the things that we were interested in, there's always been a group of people, and it's been important to who we are as a synagogue to be engaged in social activism and social justice work as an important part of who we are as a community. And at that time we were looking at Power, we felt like we had a pretty strong grounding in doing educational programs about justice issues and being involved in direct service kinds of social service issues. But an area that we knew was really important that we had trouble organizing and sustaining over time was advocacy work, trying to actually change the unjust systems that are causing the issues that we're doing direct service work to try to mitigate. And we saw Power as really being an important channel to be able to engage in advocating for systemic change. And that's indeed been an important outlet, I think, of our relationship with Power, being able to complement direct service work and educational work, both of which are really important, with organizing and advocacy to change unjust systems and make them more just. And certainly the leadership aspect has definitely had an impact, and I'm kind of a case study in that. I was more of a kind of a rank and file member, and I was kind of a leader in the, what was at the time called the Social Action Committee. But in that time since then, I've ended up becoming more of a leader through my work in Power, and I'm now on the synagogue executive committee and a vice president at the synagogue. And I think that's kind of a natural outgrowth of the leadership work that I've taken on at Power. So that's my kind of quick summary. I'll stop there, and if there's any questions, happy to answer them.
Sheila, I think you're muted.
David, thank you so much for sharing your narrative. It's really helpful, really meaningful to hear the story of your journey into Power, how it affected the congregation, and especially how it's affected you personally, and the amazing, important work that you shared with us on education justice. And that's just like one example of the remarkable work that Power does and that we're just beginning to learn about. So thank you for helping us with that. Thank you, Mordechai, as well. Another important area for Power at this time is voter engagement. And before we conclude the program tonight, we want to share with everyone here that while thinking of all of the choices of areas that we could begin to get involved in our relationship with Power, one area that was especially important to our group as to many members of our congregation has to do with the upcoming election, with many feel it's perhaps the most important election of our lifetimes. And there was a strong desire for us to become involved in voter engagement. Power offered us the opportunity to be involved with them in a program that they call Outvote. It's a voter registration program that begins with within our own house, within our own congregation. And two members of our group, Rosalie Kurz and Les Robbins, have been trained in that program and will be training another group of BZBI members next Monday night at 6 p.m. You'll be getting lots of information about that. And I want to invite Rosalie and or Les to tell us a little bit more about that.
All right. So, so I will, this is Les. And so we had a little training. Jay-Z, who is the power organizer who helped us, was very patient with our technology problems. But Outvote basically is an app that allows us to text and contact our contacts within the synagogue community about encouraging them to vote. We're provided with a script to develop a way of talking to people that encourages them to get involved, and to encourage them to vote. The object is that everybody register to vote. It's it's not partisan in any way, and that's important. But it is important that everybody be involved and be able to vote. So if somebody hasn't changed their registration, somebody hasn't registered or hasn't paid attention or hasn't voted in a while, this is just a reminder, a way to get people more involved and move it up on their list. And also if they haven't, we have vote by mail coming up, and so hopefully they'll be able to remind them of the dates associated with that and the importance of that as well. So it's just a way to make sure that our community, BZBI community, is fully engaged. Even though on the face of it, we think we're all relatively, completely engaged in the process. You never can, don't make assumptions. And so, so that's the short of it. Rosalie, you have anything to add?
No, just come on Monday and we'll go through the program together, and more time for questions and in-depth discussions. And it's actually very interesting what you think you know and what actually is. So please come Monday night.
I'd like to amend that slightly. It's
Please.
not the program Outvote, the app Outvote allows you to contact everybody on your contact list. It's not just for the members of BZBI. But I don't know about you, but I probably have a few hundred contacts on my phone. So what Outvote does, it allows me to easily send a personal text to everybody, every one of my contacts, reminding them to register to vote. And if they have any questions, to get back to me, or I can refer them to get those answers. So it's not just about BZBI, it's about each person in BZBI reaching out to the literally hundreds of people that everybody has on their contact list on their phones.
That's better.
Well, thank you for clarifying that.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Really important. And from there, we can see which of Power's other voter engagement activities we would like to become involved in. So,
want to add that Power has just hired a new staff person whose sole responsibility will be to work with congregations on voter engagement.
Wonderful.
Very good.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Sheila, should I share the links before we go to conversation and questions, or?
I don't know. Do we have time for conversation and questions? Two, three questions.
Yeah. Okay, so while we're thinking about brief conversation and questions, I'm just going to share with you all in the chat a Google form that basically, if you're interested in getting involved or learning more about this work at BZBI, please fill it out. You will still hear about this, even if you know, regardless of what you fill out, but it would help us just to identify individuals who are excited. And then in that form, there's a link at the bottom that I'm also going to share, which is to sign up for Power's mailing list so that you can just start independently hearing updates from Power about their work and what interests you.
I would suggest that we close the program and then people who wish to stay for another 15 minutes for discussion, do that.
Great, that sounds great.
Okay. Do you want to introduce the closing person?
Rabbi Abe is going to close us out back from his
Yeah, I think I'm okay without introduction in this crowd.
Back from paternity.
Giving you the cue, all right?
Yeah, well, I want to first.
Back.
I have to start thanking Sheila and Rachel, and also Les Robbins, who I see is here, and Rosalie, who's here, and Arlene Fickler's here on the call. And I didn't see Ariella Marin or Jesse Bacon tonight, but I want to really express my deep gratitude to the seven of you for your leadership on this. You know, this is something that Rabbi Annie and I and Rabbi Yosef before Rabbi Annie have been talking about for a long time for BZBI. And it, you know, I think it's true to Power's mission that it just hasn't happened until we had a crew like all of you who could help carry the ball. Because the investment of clergy that Bishop Royster was talking about is so vital to something like this, but it's like watering the soil. Like if the seeds aren't there, it's not gonna grow. And you guys are the seeds, and everyone who joined tonight, thank you so much for being here, because I see all of us nurturing what the next steps for BZBI's justice work is gonna look like. I'm also deeply grateful to Rabbi Annie for the Torah that you shared at the beginning, to Bishop Royster, even though he's not here to hear me say this, someone will report back, for taking the time to be with us tonight, and to Rabbi Liebling and to David Mazenkis. David, I was thrilled that you were able to be here tonight, because I think, you know, anything that can give your parents nachas is okay. And I just want to really been thinking about the parsha that we're going to read this week, Parashat Re'eh, and its presentation of bracha uklala, blessing and curse, life and death, and the way in which the choices that we make around justice are these choices of blessing over curse. And you know, as Bishop Royster and as Rabbi Liebling were both talking about, self-interest doesn't have to be a zero-sum game, right? We can choose the work of justice because it brings blessing to everyone. And we ought to choose the work of justice because it brings blessing to everyone. And we can have this opportunity to lift our community up and to empower a Philadelphia that we can feel proud of. So I thank you all for being here tonight. I know that Rachel is in a technical sense, the host of the meeting and is willing to stick around. And I think some of our guests are maybe able to stick around for a little bit longer. So if people do have questions, we can have some time now for a more informal discussion. But if you were waiting for someone to give you permission to go to bed, you have it. Thank you all for being with us tonight, and have a blessed evening.
Yasher koach.
Yasher koach. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
I had a question for Rachel. I didn't understand what you said about the Google something or other to sign up. Where do we get that sign up?
Oh yeah, so it's in the chat on Zoom. If you know how to get to that, and if not, I'm gonna ask, are you able to,
So the chat is up here, but I don't see anything written there.
I'm guessing that David Haas will send us.
That's what I was gonna say.
the
Yeah,
link,
I'm gonna
because
send
then
it.
it would be much easier because then you can just click on it as opposed to
Yes, that would be good. He would probably be glad to send it.
Yeah,
Good. Okay.
I will make sure that happens. Yeah.
It is in the chat. It is in the chat for those who would like to access it there.
Yeah,
I don't know how to do that on the iPad.
Oh yeah, I don't either, honestly. That's okay. We'll make sure it goes out by email. Yeah.
Any comments or questions?
Okay, so it'll go out by email then, right?
Yeah. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah,
that's good. Hi, Gail. She's muted. Can't hear you.
All right.
Hi.
Yeah, that's better.
We do still have Rabbi Mordechai here if anyone has any other specific questions about power, and no pressure, but this is an opportunity.
But just to be clear, the meeting next Monday is to get more details about what we as a synagogue could be doing.
No, I think it's only about voter registration.
Just for voter registration. Okay.
No, the meeting on Monday is to actually, as a group, we will engage in the Outvote program. We will install the app, each of us, and together we'll, as if we were sitting around a table. Mm-hmm. You know, the way people used to sit around a table and write postcards. Now they do it on Zoom. That's what
so, did I hear that it was a 6 o'clock?
6 to 7:30.
Oh, 7:30 is better. I was going to say 6 to 6 o'clock is not a good time. 7:30.
It starts at
7:30.
Oh, it starts at
6 to 7:30.
Why did you make it at dinner time?
That was recommended to us to start it earlier by people who are experienced with doing it. Yeah. After the workday, not too late. No.
Rabbi Liebling, hi, I'm Arlene Fickler.
Hi.
Thank you for joining us this evening. So Terry asked the question of what kinds of things we might be doing. Can you explain to us perhaps in a little bit more detail how we involve people in the community in activities of power? I understand the WhatsApp, it's not WhatsApp, the Voter app, and working on Voter. And I heard the very impressive work that the Mosenkis' son did in terms of David did in terms of education. But that sounds very individual and not particularly collective in terms of the community. And so I was wondering what kinds of things how communities, whether it's society, I know Society Hill Synagogue's involved, I know our Road of Sholem is involved. What kinds of activities have they done and engaged in as communities?
Well, people, Power has five different campaigns going on. So one is the electoral piece. So that is an outvote is one of those things, and people can also do phone banking and other pieces. So that's one. The second one is getting involved in our climate justice work. So all of these things have citywide teams, and some of them have statewide teams as well. So Climate Justice is both doing work in the city and statewide. So right now they are doing work on something called RGGI, which is a compact of northeastern states that are going to do regional environmental work of selling, it has to do with sort of selling pollution credits kinds of things. But what's going to happen is that this state is going to end up with several $100 million in fees. And what Power is at the table is trying to influence how those fees will then be used and distributed. So Power wants a lot of that money to go towards the development of solar energy in the state of Pennsylvania, for example. So the team of people from, a member of BZBI who's interested in environmental issues and climate justice issues would then begin working with the Climate Justice Task Force that meets monthly and works on those issues. If some, David doesn't.
Okay, so let's say I volunteer to work on the Climate Justice Project and I help identify where the fees should go, et cetera. What do I then do after I've worked at the committee for a while and learned those things? What do I do in terms of coming back to BZBI, in terms of engaging the other people who I see in the Hollywood squares here?
Right. So one of the things that happens is that in a congregation, it is helpful for the LOC, the organizing committee, the lead organizing committee, to be doing ongoing one-on-one conversations with people in the congregation. So let's say you would come back to the LOC and you would let the people in the LOC know what's going on with the Climate Justice Task Force, and maybe there would be 2 or 3 other people from BZBI also involved in the climate justice work. So that work, when I say, so we talked about research meetings. So the Climate Justice Task Force is going to have research meetings. It's going to have strategy meetings. It's going to go to meet with various state officials, et cetera. So that's the work you're going to be doing. You will bring that work back and tell people in the LOC what you're doing. And then it will filter out into the congregation, hopefully by people doing one-on-ones. And then during those one-on-ones, people hear what's going on, and then other people can get interested or excited and say, oh, I want to do that too. I'm really interested in climate justice. How can I get involved? So there is a lot of opportunity. So there's climate justice. There's the work that David talked about is education. So right now, we're doing other work in the city of Philadelphia around education issues that are not just about the statewide funding issues, but local issues around education. And of course, we have a whole campaign called Live Free, which has been working on mass incarceration issues, gun violence, the role of the police in the city. They were very busy, as you could imagine, this past spring, and they were the people who really, it was the work of our Live Free committee that was the basis for 3 city council resolutions that were put forth by council people in June and will be discussed in the fall. So the Live Free committee is going to be very involved in meeting with city council folks and lobbying and trying to get measures passed around policing in the city. Likewise, our economic dignity campaign is, their focus now is a lot on living wage issues in McDonald's and other fast food places in the city. So you can the issues get decided collectively by Power as a whole. And once the issues are decided, people get to plug into what interests them, what their passion is, where they want to be, what they're drawn to do. And then they in turn bring that back to their congregation to let other people know what's going on, so other people could then get involved as well.
Thank you for that. Sheila and Rachel, it seems to me that it would be useful for us to, if we're going to send people the Power sign-up form, that we should send the descriptions of the 4 areas, so that particularly because the concept of living free the title Living Free doesn't
We
necessarily
need a
convey
little
the
blurb.
information. Yeah, a little blurb would be useful.
If you
Yeah,
go to the
that's-
Power website, there are blurbs on all of them. So the Power
Ah.
website will give you, you can use those.
Thank
Then
you.
we're
for-
asking people to do two steps, if we can provide it.
You're right. I'm just saying you can go to the
easier.
Power website and you can copy and paste
Yeah.
it, and then it can be on your thing. Yeah.
No, but that was such a helpful explanation of how.
Yes,
of how
yes, thank you
people
very much.
get involved. But thank you for that. That
It's
really
just
makes a huge difference.
Off of the theoretical example of you wanting to get involved with the climate team, Arlene, I've been somewhat involved with the Climate Justice Committee, and so I would love to attend those meetings with other BCBI members. Does anyone have any other questions or thoughts?
It's been such a full evening, you know. We've ingested so much. It just, you know,
Yes, thank you very much.
absorb it. It's wonderful.
Great. All right then. And we hope to see many of you next Monday, and bring your friends with you.
Thanks, everybody. I look forward to BZBI becoming active members. And just on a small personal note, some of you might know Alana Trachtman, who is a member of BZBI. And
Yes.
just she's an old friend of ours, and I just heard from her today, and she's going to be back in the States from Israel at the end of the month, she hopes.
And she'll be back in our BZBI community at the same time. We all look forward to it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Good night,
Thank you for
everybody.
everything.
Good night.
Good night. Be well. All right. Good night, everybody.
Should I just end the meeting? Yeah.
I think it's time.
Okay. All right. Good night.
After 4 or 5, yeah.